Well, guys, this is the last time we'll be meeting like this in 2022. Now, my producer Ryan said to me, "Hey, Chael, why don't you give out some awards? Who was your fighter of the year? What was your fight of the year? How about your knockout of the year?" Am I a pessimistic person? Because I don't want to be. I don't want to be. I mean, I can't control that any more than you guys can. But am I a pessimistic person? Because when Ryan asked me for the fighter of the year, my mind instantly went to the dud of the year. When Ryan was asking me the greatest fight of the year, my mind instantly goes, well, it'd be easier for me to tell you the biggest flop of 2022. So is that the way we should do it? I prefer to praise, believe me. I don't enjoy giving the lash, believe that or not. But when I look back at 2022, when I look back at a borderline crime, I mean, there was money taken for services that were not rendered. Does that sound legal to you? It was a borderline crime what Francis and Surreal did. There has never, and I do literally mean never, been a storyline in heavyweight history like Francis and Surreal. And if you're smart, Marks, you know exactly what it was. But if you're not a hardcore, you don't follow this close, you really want me to tell you what that storyline was because you never heard it, did you? You never saw that media tour. You never saw that blitz. You never saw those two guys that were smart enough to become bilingual so they could speak to a North American audience, go out and do news shows of sports, promoting or talking about or hyping that fight at all. That fight took place in February. Now, this is off the top of my head, but I think I'm right. I think it was February. There was a fight several months later that wasn't for a title, was not in the most perennial class, and did not even put up the same amount of prize money. It took place in Arizona. Nothing against Arizona, but you guys aren't some fight mecca. It set the pay-per-view record. It got announced, got reported and put out, and that was a non-title fight between Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje. But at that point of the year, it had the record. And that's a very cool thing for them. But you look back and go, well, wait a minute. That's in the same year that we had the greatest storyline in heavyweight history. Warrior versus Hogan. It was the Intercontinental Champ versus the WWF Champ. You don't get things like this. They fall into your lap. And those guys went out of their way to make the world uninterested. I mean, that would be one of the bigger stories of 2022 for me. And I'm not looking to give them a hard time. I'm just sharing with you. That's a big deal. You took the money and you didn't give the service. And then you refused service after that, acting as though somebody didn't give you enough money. I mean, it's a very confusing world, right? I mean, the best defense is a good offense. One of my favorite ones, I got to leave 2022, but one of my all-time favorites was what Nevada pulled on Conor McGregor the day that Team Khabib jumped the cage and attacked Conor. They fined Conor. I don't even know if you guys know that. I think it was 150 grand. If I'm wrong, it was 75. They fined Conor. Now, the commission doesn't have a whole bunch of jobs, but they damn sure have one, which is to keep the fighter safe. Conor was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was supposed to be doing. The apparatus that was supposed to be secured was failed to be secured, and they went after Conor. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. They didn't make a mistake. They didn't really think Conor did something wrong. They got some legal minds in a room and go after him before he files the lawsuit, and do it now. Come after him and get him settled. I had this happen one time, guys. I'm in high school, and there was a coach. His coach is legendary. I'm going to keep his name out of it. He's legendary in Oregon. Possibly for all of the wrong reasons, but very successful guy. And he was assistant at the time. He's 26 years old, tough guy. Just got done with a college career himself, a tough guy. And he was sitting down. You know how people be like, their backs up against the wall and their feet are on the ground, but then they'll sit like their butt is touching their shoes. He was sitting like that, and the team is doing sprints in the gym. And the 220-pounder. But a kid is giving the coach the business. The coach is trying to, hey, you got to go faster. Hey, you got to go harder. Hey, you're last. The coach is doing his job. He's trying to work out of this kid. This kid breaks. He breaks and he just starts beelining for the coach and he's screaming, he's just coming right at the coach. The coach pushes up and springs to his feet just in time to catch the kid with a hook and knock him out. Well, you got a big problem. Doesn't matter if the kid was running at him or not. You have a 17-year-old kid that was just struck by a coach. So the head coach wakes the kid up and he takes him in the back room and he says, hey, you're in big trouble. You just charged a coach. Now, if you apologize, I might be able to make this go away. If you apologize to him in a sincere manner, I might be able to get you out of this. And this story's from 30 years ago. But it was that exact same kind. You bet your ass that 17-year-old kid, oh, thank you, sir. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was running toward the whole bit. Never told his parents, never told anybody. Thought he was the one in trouble. I mean, you better believe that same concept is what happened to Conor McGregor. They have a job to keep him safe. They failed. They now have exposure. So they went after Conor, and Conor wrote him the check. I mean, I'm just sharing for you, like, there's some of these great things that happen in MMA, and I don't want you guys to miss them. Then you talk about the other side of the coin, like, who was the fighter of the year? That's a tough one. It's a real tough one because it's real tough to ignore Chimaev. Now, there was a mistake made where he missed weight. Do we factor that in? Now, we're talking about who was the best fighter and who was the most impressive. Then we're just talking about what happened in ring. Do we factor that in? But it would also be very tough to not pay homage to what Alex Pereira did. Alex Pereira beats somebody somewhere with some placement on the card. And the next thing you know, he draws into Sean Strickland, number 6 guy in the world, whose last loss was many years ago at a different weight class, and it was to Kamaru Usman in a pretty damn good fight. I mean, the jig is up. Sean's going to go beat this guy. And not only did that not happen, but Pierre was able to get out of there in a very short period of time. Pretty impressive. Qualifies for a world title fight. Now, it doesn't overly matter how good you are. There is still a human element that can supersede and even at times cripple your abilities. That's just known as pressure. You want to put pressure on a guy, put him in a main event, put him in a 5-round contest, put him against a guy that's already lapped the division. Put him at Madison Square Garden. Put him in the main event. All of those things happened. As a 2.5 to 1 underdog, and he found a way. He lost. Alex Pereira, here, put this in perspective, guys. Alex Pereira lost more rounds in that fight than Israel Adesanya lost in 2022. That's a factual and literal statement. And Alex Pereira won the contest. I mean, it's almost a riddle. And then the way he handled himself. I mean, not for nothing, that has to matter. How high does your stock go? Whether he had a good backstory and he had the help of the champion or not, he sold out Madison Square Garden. Chimaev did not. Maybe Chimaev could have, but he didn't. He didn't sell out an arena as a main event anywhere in the country. And I think you got to give Pereira his credit. Then he comes out, Pereira. You guys remember he was riding a hoverboard? Is that what they call those? A one wheel? It was like a skateboard type thing. And he's hitting focus mitts. And even though that was meant to be satire and comedy, it was an extremely athletic thing to do. And what about the time he's on Instagram and he kicks a soccer ball into the air, grabs an archery set and puts an arrow straight through the soccer ball before it landed on the ground? That's interesting. Then it turns out he's indigenous of Brazil and he comes out in his tribal paint and headdress. He's interesting. Alex Pereira is interesting. I just told you 3 different things that a guy who I've never met did. I don't know that I could do that about myself. I don't know if I could tell you 3 things that I did and brought to you guys over the year. It would require some level of thinking. That's how interesting he was. But then I know about both his fights. I mean, for me, maybe it's just within my mind. But Pierre's stock went up as high as anybody. So, I mean, right, you got two sides of the coin. You've got the booby prize. The booby prize goes straight on the heavyweights. Straight on. The interim champion against the undisputed champion in the heavyweight class. The greatest storyline in history. A fight that nobody watched. And I stand by it. I'm not being dramatic. That is a borderline a crime. You were given a fee for an expected service that you didn't provide. That's true. That happened.